The endless stream of travelers flowing through Galactic Central Station never ceased to amaze Transit Officer HFY. As I adjusted my uniform's collar for the 1000th time today, my 4 eyes scanned the bustling terminal with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Being the chief coordinator for Docking Bay 7 was no simple task, especially during peak migration season. Next I called out, my voice synthesizer perfectly modulating the 7 most common languages of the Galactic Union. The line of various species shuffled forward, each bringing their own particular brand of chaos to my perfectly ordered station. A towering Prudaxian merchant, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking against the polished floor, presented his credentials with 3 of his appendages while simultaneously arguing with someone on his neural comm link. I processed his documentation with practiced efficiency, barely glancing at his cargo manifest. Standard stuff. Luxury goods from the core worlds, heading to the outer rim. Cleared for departure. Bay 7G. Next. The day continued in its usual rhythm. A family of Zentorians, their bioluminescent tentacles pulsing with travel anxiety. A delegation of MX-Thal diplomats, their hover platforms humming in perfect harmony. Each presented their own unique challenges, but nothing I couldn't handle with my centuries of experience. Then she walked up to my station. The human was, to put it diplomatically, a mess. Her uniform, which I recognized as belonging to the Earth Defense Force, was wrinkled and stained with substances I didn't care to identify. Dark circles underlined her eyes, and her hair a shade of brown that reminded me of fertile soil stuck out at angles that seemed to defy several laws of physics. "Officer," she said, her voice carrying that peculiar human raspiness that always made me wonder if their species was perpetually suffering from respiratory infections. "I need transportation to the Helios sector. Urgent priority." I ran my upper eyes over her documentation while my lower pair focused on her general dishevelment. "Alexandra Winters, Earth Defense Force," I read aloud, making no effort to hide my disdain. "Your credentials appear to be in order, but—" "But what?" she asked, one of her eyebrows rising in that strange way humans had of expressing skepticism. The gesture always reminded me of a parasitic worm from my homeworld. "But there are protocols, procedures. Look at your state of appearance. This is Galactic Central Station, not some backwater spaceport where humans can just swagger in looking like they have wrestled with the Kraken of Jupiter. Besides," I added, allowing a note of smug satisfaction to enter my voice, "all priority seating for the next 3 cycles has been allocated to the MX-Thal Diplomatic Corps." The human Alexandra, though her credentials noted she preferred Alex, leaned forward slightly. I noticed a fresh scratch across her left cheek, still showing signs of recent medical sealant. "Officer HFY," she said. "Reading my name from my badge, I understand protocols. I respect them. But right now, I need to get to the Helios sector, and I need to get there fast." "Perhaps," I suggested, my voice dripping with false helpfulness, "you should have considered that before presenting yourself in such a state. The Galactic Union has standards, you know. We can't have just anyone claiming priority status, especially not." I paused for effect, all 4 of my eyes blinking in sequence, ... humans. The corners of her mouth twitched, and for a moment I thought I detected something dangerous in her expression. But no, humans were a newly admitted species to the Union. Barely 3 centuries of spaceflight to their name. What could this disheveled soldier possibly do? Next I called out, already looking past her to the Meridian collective mind behind her in line. That's when the emergency broadcast began flashing across every screen in the terminal. The emergency broadcast bathed the terminal in pulsing red light. My antennae tingled as the neural feed pumped information directly into my consciousness. The message originated from the Helios sector, specifically from Governor Cruel Mar of the Asteria colony. "This is an emergency transmission to all Galactic Union stations." Cruel Mar's voice rang out, his usual diplomatic polish replaced by raw emotion. "I must share news of extraordinary heroism that occurred in our sector mere hours ago." The human soldier Alex stood perfectly still now, her expression unreadable. Around us, travelers of all species stopped to watch the broadcast, their various appendages, tentacles, and sensory organs, all focused on the floating holoscreen. 12 hours ago, our colony faced extinction. Cruel Mar continued. A previously dormant volcanic system beneath our primary settlement became active without warning. Our evacuation protocols proved insufficient against the unprecedented scale of the disaster. That's when Human Lieutenant Alexandra Winters arrived. My lower eyes darted to Alex, who seemed suddenly fascinated by a spot on the floor. The scratch on her cheek caught the red emergency lighting, and I realized with a start that it looked like a burn. What you are about to witness was recorded by our security systems. The broadcast shifted to footage showing a massive underground cavern. Streams of molten rock poured through fissures in the walls, while thousands of Asterian colonists huddled on a rapidly shrinking safe zone. The temperature readout in the corner of the footage climbed steadily higher. Then a figure in an Earth Defense Force uniform appeared, rappelling down from an access shaft. The footage zoomed in on Alex's face, determined and focused despite the hellish environment. She carried something on her back, a device I didn't recognize. Lieutenant Winters had been passing through our system when she picked up our distress call, Cruel Mars' voice narrated. She arrived before any other help could reach us, bringing with her a prototype thermal redistribution device technology that hasn't even been approved for testing by the Union Safety Council. The footage showed Alex setting up the device, her movements quick and precise despite the growing chaos. Several Asterians approached to help, but she waved them back, working alone in the dangerous conditions. What happened next defied all our scientific understanding, Cruel Mars said, his voice filled with wonder. On screen, Alex activated the device. A brilliant pulse of energy shot out, creating a network of crystalline structures that began absorbing and redirecting the thermal energy. The lava flows started to cool and solidify, forming natural barriers that protected the colonists. The device overloaded after only 10 minutes, Cruel Mars continued. But Lieutenant Winters had calculated that this would be just enough time. She had memorized the colonial geological surveys during her descent and knew exactly where to place the device for maximum effect. The footage showed Alex retrieving the smoking remains of the device, her uniform now singed and covered in volcanic ash. The timestamp indicated this was just over an hour ago, but thanks to her quick thinking and willingness to test unproven technology, all 8,000 colonists survived. The structural damage to our main settlement was minimal. But Lieutenant Winters didn't stay for recognition or rewards. She insisted on immediately departing for the Helios sector's main Union embassy, stating that her device's success needed to be reported so similar systems could be deployed to other volcanic worlds. My antennae drooped with shame as I remembered my earlier words about humans and their standards. The footage ended, returning to Cruel Mars' face. I am hereby officially requesting that all Union facilities grant Lieutenant Winters maximum priority clearance. Her actions today exemplify the highest ideals of the Galactic Union, and her continued mission may save countless more lives. The broadcast ended. The terminal remained eerily quiet, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy staring at the disheveled human before my station. The dirt on her uniform wasn't dirt at all, it was volcanic ash. The medical sealant on her cheek covered a burn from superheated air. And her urgency. The embassy, Alex said quietly, breaking the silence. I really do need to get there. Sir, she added the honorific without a trace of sarcasm, despite my earlier treatment. My voice synthesizer crackled as I tried to speak, emotion disrupting its usual perfect modulation. I, of course. Yes. Right away my upper eyes couldn't meet her gaze as my lower pair frantically began processing her priority clearance. Base 7A. The diplomatic transport. It leaves in 3 minutes. She nodded once and turned to go. Before she could walk away, my voice synthesizer finally cooperated. Lieutenant Winters. She paused. Thank you, I said, for showing me what Union standards truly look like. A small smile crossed her face, not smug, not superior, just tired and genuine. Then she headed for Base 7A, leaving me to ponder how many more assumptions about humans I might need to reconsider. The security footage from the Asterian colony continued playing on my personal terminal long after Lieutenant Winters had departed. As a transit officer, I had security clearance to access the full, unedited records. What I saw made my exoskeleton tingle with a mixture of terror and amazement. The crisis had begun during the colony's rest cycle. Seismic sensors registered the first tremors at 0300 local time, but no one expected the scale of what would follow. Within minutes, the underground magma chamber that had lain dormant for millennia ruptured its ancient seals. The colony's automated systems began evacuation protocols immediately. Asterian citizens, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with fear patterns, crowded into the emergency shelters. But the designers had never anticipated a catastrophe of this magnitude. The heat shielding wouldn't last more than an hour against temperatures that were climbing past 2,000 degrees Kelvin. Governor Cruel Mar's voice crackled over the emergency channel. Attention all vessels within range. This is a Priority 1 distress call. We have 8,000 souls trapped in Shelter Complex B. Our heat shields are failing. Estimated survival time 52 minutes. The response from nearby Union ships was immediate but futile. The closest rescue vessel was 3 hours away. The colony's fate seemed sealed. Then a different voice cut through the channel. Asteria Colony, this is Lieutenant Alexandra Winters, Earth Defense Force. I'm 20 minutes out in a scout ship. Hold position. The colony's sensor officer, his skin flashing patterns of confusion, turned to Cruel Mar. Sir, that vessel is a Class 3 scout ship. No rescue capabilities, no heavy equipment. Just one human operator. Cruel Mar's response was interrupted by Winter's voice again, requesting all geological survey data for your primary cavern system. And I need to know if you have any liquid nitrogen reserves. The next few minutes showed a flurry of activity as colony systems transferred massive data packages to Winter's ship. Her responses came in quick, clipped tones. Got it. Good. Okay, that might work. Stand by. Through the external cameras, I watched her scout ship execute a landing that violated at least 15 safety protocols. The small vessel screamed through the entry tunnel, its hull barely clearing the rocks, and landed hard enough to crack its landing struts. Winters emerged wearing what looked like a modified environment suit. The colonists' confusion was evident in their light patterns. The suit appeared cobbled together from spare parts, with additional cooling systems jury-rigged to its surface. Governor, she said, hauling out a device that looked too large for her to carry alone, I need your people to clear a path to the main thermal vent, and I need every drop of liquid nitrogen you have. Cruel Mar, to his credit, didn't waste time questioning her. The nitrogen reserves are for emergency cooling of our quantum computers. Using them will destroy decades of research data. Better than losing 8,000 lives. Winters was already moving, the massive device balanced precariously on her environmental suit's enhanced frame. This is a prototype thermal redistributor. It's not rated for these conditions, but the nitrogen should keep it stable long enough. I paused the footage, zooming in on the device. The design was distinctly human, a chaotic mixture of cutting-edge technology and what appeared to be manual override controls. No Union engineer would ever approve such a design. Our technology emphasized reliability through simplicity. This machine looked like it had been built by someone who considered backup systems for their backup systems and then added manual controls just in case everything else failed. Resuming playback, I watched as Winters directed the colony's engineers to help her position the device. The ground shook continuously now. Emergency force fields flickered as their power supplies struggled against the rising heat. The plan is simple, Winters explained, her voice steady despite the chaos. This device creates a crystalline lattice that channels and redirects thermal energy. We are going to use the nitrogen to supercool it beyond its safety limits. When the lattice forms, it should redirect enough heat to stabilize the chamber. One of the engineers, his skin pulsing emergency patterns, spoke up. Lieutenant, the energy calculations alone would take our computers hours to process. How can you be sure? Winters didn't look up from her work as she answered. I did the math on the way down. She paused, connecting another coolant line. Most of it anyway. The rest is, call it an educated guess. The footage showed the next few minutes in excruciating detail. Winters worked with a precision that seemed at odds with the apparent recklessness of her plan. Every connection was checked 3 times. Every power reading was verified. She had the engineers position emergency shields at specific angles, creating a complex geometric pattern around the device. The temperature continued to rise. The main heat shields were at 97% capacity. In the shelter, thousands of Asterians huddled together, their combined fear patterns creating a haunting light show. Activating in 3, 2, 1. The device hummed to life. Crystalline structures began forming in the air, spreading outward in a complex three-dimensional web. The liquid nitrogen pumped through the system at rates far beyond its design specifications. Then something went wrong. A power surge ripped through the device. Winters lunged forward, bypassing the automated systems and grabbing the manual controls. Her hands moved across them in a blur, adjusting dozens of parameters simultaneously. The containment field is failing, an engineer shouted. We need to shut it down. No, Winter's voice was strained but determined. The lattice is almost complete. 10 more seconds. The crystal structure continued to grow, even as parts of the device began to melt. Winters stayed at the controls, her suit's cooling systems visibly struggling against the intense heat. When the blinding light faded from the security feeds, I expected to see devastation. Instead, what I witnessed defied every safety protocol and scientific principle I'd learned in my centuries as a Union citizen. The crystalline lattice hung in the air like a frozen web of light, pulsing with redirected energy. The massive thermal vent that had threatened to destroy the colony now fed directly into this artificial structure, its deadly heat being channeled and redistributed through countless crystalline pathways. But Lieutenant Winters wasn't done. She stood at the smoking remains of the thermal redistributor, her environment suit's external panels nearly melted away. Her voice came through the comm system, somehow still calm. Phase 1 complete. Starting Phase 2. Phase 2. The footage showed the colony's engineering team exchanging confused glances, their bioluminescence flickering with uncertainty patterns. None of them had been briefed on a Phase 2. Even Governor Krulmar leaned forward, his sensory tendrils extended in surprise. The lattice is stable, Winters explained, already moving toward one of the secondary tunnels. But it won't last. We need to redirect the magma flow or this whole chamber will collapse in about 18 minutes. An engineer's voice cut in. Redirect it? That's impossible. The pressure would normally tear through any barrier we could build. Winters finished for him. But we are not going to build a barrier. We are going to use the pressure against itself. She turned to Krulmar. Governor, I need your mining charges. All of them. The next few minutes of footage showed organized chaos as Winters directed teams to specific points around the chamber. Each team placed mining charges according to her exact specifications, while she consulted what looked like a hastily drawn diagram on her suit's forearm computer. Lieutenant Krulmar asked, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone speaking to a potentially unstable individual, "Are you suggesting we detonate explosives in an already unstable volcanic chamber?" Exactly. Winters checked another charge placement. But timing is critical. When I give the signal, they need to detonate in precise sequence. Each explosion will create a pressure wave. If timed correctly, the waves will interfere with each other and force the magma flow to take the path of least resistance. And where is this path of least resistance? Winters pointed to an ancient lava tube that led away from the colony. A tunnel connects to an empty magma chamber about 2 kilometers down. The geological survey shows it's big enough to handle the flow, and it's reinforced by natural basalt formations. We just need to convince the magma to go there instead of here. The engineer team's bioluminescence shifted to patterns indicating extreme skepticism. One of them spoke up. The mathematical precision required for such a sequence would be already calculated. Winters interrupted, tapping her forearm computer. Did it while setting up the thermal redistributor. The hard part was converting the numbers to account for local gravity and pressure variations. Speaking of which, she glanced at a readout. We have 12 minutes before the lattice fails. Places, everyone. The next 10 minutes of footage showed the most precisely choreographed disaster response I have ever witnessed. Winters coordinated teams through multiple comm channels simultaneously, positioning them with the kind of accuracy usually reserved for quantum measurements. Her voice remained steady, but I noticed her hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and heat stress. Charges set came the final confirmation. Good. Winters moved to a central position, her eyes fixed on the readouts streaming across her suit's displays. On my mark, follow the detonation sequence exactly. A half-second delay could collapse the entire chamber. The tension in the chamber was visible even through the security footage. The crystalline lattice above them pulsed with increasingly unstable energy patterns. Small rocks fell from the ceiling as seismic activity increased. In the shelter, 8,000 Asterians watched their screens with their luminescence dimmed to near darkness, a sign of extreme stress in their species. Sequence starting in 3, 2, 1, mark. The first explosion was almost anticlimactic, a small pop that barely registered on the sensors. But it was followed by another, then another, each precisely timed. The detonations moved in a complex pattern around the chamber, creating invisible waves of pressure that intersected and reinforced each other. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the magma flow began to shift, almost imperceptibly at first, then with increasing speed. The deadly river of molten rock curved away from its path toward the colony, bending against all natural laws to flow into the ancient lava tube. Its working, an engineer's voice carried clear triumph. The pressure readings are. That's when the crystal lattice began to collapse. Winter's voice cut through the growing chaos. Everyone out. The heat sink is failing faster than calculated. Governor, get your people back. The lattice fractured, sending shards of energy-charged crystal raining down. Winters sprinted forward, pushing 2 engineers clear of a falling piece larger than a transport shuttle. Her suit's remaining cooling systems whined in protest as she drove herself toward the final set of charges. The sequence isn't complete, she shouted over the comm. 3 more charges or the pressure wave collapses. Get clear. I will finish it. The footage showed her running through a storm of falling crystal and rising steam, manually triggering each charge as she passed. The timing had to be perfect, even as the chamber crumbled around her. 2 charges left. Then 1. The final explosion triggered just as a massive crystal shard struck the ground where Winters had been standing seconds before. The security feed went dark for several moments, filled with static and interference. When it cleared, the chamber had transformed. The magma flow was completely diverted, disappearing into the ancient lava tube with a sound like distant thunder. The remains of the crystal lattice dissolved into harmless light, leaving behind air that was hot but breathable. And there, emerging from a cloud of steam like some ancient warrior from human mythology, came Lieutenant Alexandra Winters. Her environment suit was in tatters, its cooling systems completely burned out. The scratch on her cheek had reopened, leaving a trail of red human blood mixing with the soot on her face. But she was smiling. "Colony Command," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "Magma flow is successfully diverted. Chamber stability at 89% and rising. Request permission to submit a rather lengthy equipment replacement requisition form." The laughter that erupted through the command channel carried the slightly hysterical edge of people who had just witnessed the impossible. Even Governor Cruelmar's bioluminescence shifted to patterns of joy and disbelief. "Permission granted, Lieutenant," he replied, "though I suspect the Union Science Council will have quite a few questions about your methods." "Just doing my job." Sir Winters started walking toward the exit, her movements showing the bone-deep exhaustion she'd been hiding. "But if it's all the same to you, I should probably report to the sector embassy before someone decides this incident requires a few decades of safety reviews." The security footage ended, leaving me staring at my terminal in stunned silence. Around me, the Galactic Central Station had transformed. The usual bustle of travelers had given way to clusters of beings from dozens of species, all discussing what they'd just witnessed on the emergency broadcast. A Prudaxian merchant who had passed through my checkpoint earlier approached my station again. "That human," he said, his crystalline form reflecting the station lights, "she saved my bondmate. My bondmate works in the Asterian colony's quantum research division." Before I could respond, others joined in. A Zentorian family's tentacles glowed with gratitude patterns. They had relatives in the colony. 2 MX-Thal diplomats, who had been so insistent on their priority seating earlier, now quietly requested their travel arrangements be altered to accommodate Lieutenant Winters. My own perspective had shifted so dramatically it made my antennae ache. I had dismissed her based on appearance, on predetermined notions about her species. Now, reviewing the footage again, I saw details I had missed in my initial prejudice. The wrinkles in her uniform? Each one told the story of movement, of action, of someone who prioritized saving lives over maintaining appearances. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of continuous calculation, of running complex mathematical sequences while in transit to save precious minutes. Even her insistence on immediate transport to the embassy revealed forethought. She knew her unorthodox methods would need official documentation before they could help other colonies. My communication panel lit up with an incoming priority message. Governor Cruel Mar himself, requesting an update on Lieutenant Winter's travel status. I confirmed she had boarded the diplomatic transport, trying to keep my voice synthesizer steady as I explained my initial reluctance to grant her priority access. Ah, Cruel Mar said, his tone carrying understanding rather than condemnation. You reacted as many of us did, Officer Zexral. Humans are unpredictable by Union standards. They combine reckless action with precise calculation in ways that seem contradictory to more established species. The thermal redistributor, I said, my curiosity overwhelming my professional demeanor. It wasn't approved for testing. How did she even have it? Cruel Mar's bioluminescence flickered with what I recognized as amusement. She mentioned something about borrowing it from a research facility. Apparently, she left a note promising to return it after testing under field conditions. The sheer audacity of it made my exoskeleton tingle. Borrowing experimental technology, calculating complex pressure wave interactions while flying a ship, improvising solutions that violated dozens of safety protocols, and all of it done with a certainty that bordered on prophecy. Sir, I asked, do you think she knew it would work? The precise timing of the explosions, the crystal lattice, all of it. I asked her that before she left. Cruel Mar replied. She said something quite remarkable. She said, according to my calculations, it had a 47% chance of complete success, but a 47% chance of saving everyone was better than a 100% chance of saving no one. Around me, the station's atmosphere had changed. Species that normally kept to their own kinds were mingling, discussing what they'd witnessed. A young Asterian, their bioluminescence bright with excitement, was explaining to a group of varied species how the crystal lattice had looked from inside the shelter. A Union engineer was arguing with a MX-Thal scientist about the theoretical possibilities of Winter's pressure wave calculations. My terminal pinged with an update. The diplomatic transport carrying Lieutenant Winters had departed on schedule. But now, instead of carrying only MX-Thal diplomats, it had representatives from 6 different species aboard, all heading to the embassy to register their support for immediately implementing her volcanic stabilization technique across the Union. I found myself doing something unprecedented in my centuries of service. I accessed the Union's personnel database and flagged Lieutenant Alexandra Winter's credentials for permanent priority access. Then I added a personal note to her file. Appearance and protocol may not predict competence or courage. This human exemplifies the highest standards of the Union through actions rather than appearances. Priority access recommended without question. Transit Officer Zexral, Galactic Central Station. As I returned to processing the line of travelers before me, I noticed something had changed in my own behavior. I found myself looking past the surface, past the predetermined notions that centuries of experience had built. Each being who approached my station might, like Lieutenant Winters, contain depths I couldn't fathom from mere appearance. Next I called out, all 4 of my eyes bright with new awareness. The universe, it seemed, still had much to teach me about its endless possibilities, and humans, unpredictable as they were, might be its most interesting teachers yet. 3 cycles later, I received a notice that made all 4 of my eyes blink in rapid succession. The Union Council had approved an emergency measure, fast-tracking the implementation of what they now called the Winters Protocol across all volcanic colony worlds. The thermal redistribution technology, combined with her precise pressure wave calculations, had already saved 2 more colonies from similar disasters. But that wasn't what caused my antennae to twitch with amusement. No, it was the second notice, a comprehensive revision to Union transit protocols. The new regulations specifically prohibited denying priority access based on a traveler's appearance or species. They even included an example case study featuring a certain transit officer's interaction with a disheveled human soldier. As I processed this information, my terminal lit up with an incoming transport request. The credentials made my exoskeleton vibrate with recognition. Lieutenant Alexandra Winters, Earth Defense Force. This time, her priority status was marked with the highest possible clearance. She appeared before my station looking, if possible, even more disheveled than before. Her uniform bore scorch marks from what appeared to be plasma discharge, and her hair had achieved a level of chaos that suggested recent exposure to zero gravity. "Officer Zix Raul," she said, a tired smile crossing her face. "Good to see you again." "Lieutenant Winters," I replied, my voice synthesizer automatically adjusting to a more respectful tone. "I see you are maintaining your unique approach to uniform regulations." "Just finished preventing a reactor breach on the Proxima mining station," she said, stifling a yawn. "Didn't have time to change. Need transport to the embassy, I guessed, already processing her clearance." She shook her head. "Actually, I need passage to Earth. Got 3 weeks of mandatory leave. Apparently, saving 3 colonies and a mining station in 1 month exceeds some human stress protocols." I processed her request, noting with satisfaction that every system automatically granted her highest priority. Then I noticed something that made my antennae curl with delight. "Lieutenant," I said, struggling to keep my voice synthesizer from betraying my amusement, "you will be interested to know that your achievements have inspired some changes in Union regulations." Oh, she raised that expressive human eyebrow. "Indeed. In fact, there's a new training program for transit officers. It's called the Winters Directive. All officers must now undergo sensitivity training to avoid," I called up the exact wording, "prejudicial assumptions based on superficial observations." For a moment she just stared at me. Then she burst out laughing, drawing curious looks from nearby travelers. "You mean I'm literally a case study and not judging a book by its cover?" I believe that is the human expression. Yes, I finalized her transport arrangements. Though I must say, Lieutenant, your current appearance would still fail at least 7 of the old protocol standards. "Only 7, she grinned, gathering her scorched travel bag. "I must be losing my touch." As she walked toward her departure gate, I noticed something that perfectly summed up everything I had learned about humans. On the back of her burned uniform, someone had written in what appeared to be reactor coolant safety third results first. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And that, I realized, was probably for the best.